Hey, it's your boys. It's Anime Parlay. Yeah, it's been a little while. We had a break last week, but we are here to shoot the stuff. Gonna try not to curse, even though I always do. Again, and if you've read the title, which obviously you have, if you've clicked on this video, we are talking, or at least I am for sure, a lot of crap about hockey. I got problems with it, and you know how I do. It is going to be Cameron shitting. I'm going to curse this time. Shitting all over this power system. So I'll let the rest of the group introduce themselves.
What up, y'all? Peace and blessings. It's your boy, Mr. Wild and Free.
Yo, what's up? It's Moogie Mike. Trying out that name for a little bit.
Smash Catcher, let's go.
Hey, okay, so you're probably reading the title, you're hearing obviously what we've said just to kind of lead into this video, and you're spitting your coffee or your cereal or whatever it is that you drink out of your mouth because what we're saying probably makes zero sense to you. So don't worry, we are going to explain. So, I mean, just basically, here's my take on hockey. And we'll give like a basic take. I want to get you guys' thoughts, and then we'll get into the why of it, and then we'll kind of just look through how hockey has been introduced and how it's kind of evolved from its introduction and where it kind of fits within the story now, and the problems, and that's the big key, the problems that it is causing in the story, which, in short, in my opinion, are basically power level creep. So we'll get into it. You probably already kind of get an idea of what we're kind of getting at, but here's the general overview. I think Oda created hockey. Like, I think he had ideas for it in the beginning. Obviously, you can look back at maybe Lord of the Coast, which I think is kind of a retroactive headcanon. But whatever, you can make the argument Shanks uses his intimidating willpower to scare away the Lord of the Coast, right? And for anybody who's unfamiliar, that is the giant sea king that we see that takes Shanks' arm in the first chapter, basically in the beginning of the story. So the argument is Oda introduced or has this kind of concept for maybe some kind of hockey, willpower, whatever. He begins to refine it through the series and then formally introduces it basically kind of like a little bit like pre-timeskip. This is like right when the crew gets split up. It's, I would argue, effectively Amazon Lily. But we will get into it. But I think that since its introduction, it has been sloppy. It has caused problems. It has caused continuity errors. And in this point in the story, it has become essential to basically anybody defeating any higher level enemy or antagonist in the story. And we're seeing that play out firsthand, specifically through the weakling members of the Straw Hat crew, which, you know, I'm not going to include Jinbei, but he's with them, and obviously Nico Robin, in their fight against the Gods Knights, right? Or at least in their skirmishes or whatever. And there's a looming question as to whether Luffy, Zoro, Sanji are going to be sidelined for the whole of the arc, and it's just going to be like, minus the monster trio, the rest of the Straw Hat crew handling this new enemy, or is it going to be basically the rest of the crew is feckless against the Gods Knights and we're just waiting on Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro to come save the day? And we know that the only way that they're going to be able to do that, Straw Hats being like the non-monster trio, is probably going to be with Haki. So, what are you guys' thoughts on that before we jump into kind of like the origins of Haki and kind of this whole backstory of how it's been introduced and how it's been concepted and refined through the course of the series?
Yeah. I'll preface the conversation by saying that I do not mind any of the attempts that Oda has made to retcon hockey into a proper existence within the series. So for those that are going back and saying like, oh, like that might have been what Shanks used during the Lord of the Coast situation, and even some of the speculation around quote unquote why Shanks has lost his arm, which goes a little bit further into the series beyond hockey and actually into the newest power system introduced. I think that any of those opportunities just feels like a really unique and awesome opportunity to really bring things full circle. And sometimes in storytelling, that's necessary, right? Where you start with a concept or an idea at the beginning of a journey, and then only through its refinement do you really recognize how it fits the pieces together with its origin story, right? So I'm not mad at it. I think that there are super interesting nuances to the representation of hockey and the supposed differences that we might see across islands and cultures and all of those things and how that might be represented. And so I'm just a fan of what Oda has been trying to do, even if it was something that was introduced later on in the series. It doesn't feel flagrant to me. It feels meaningful enough. And I think that, especially in the context of this latest power system that we are seeing within the world of One Piece, it feels ever more relevant now than it has before. So that's all I'll say.
Facts.
All
Moogie?
right, what about the rest of you? Thoughts on hockey? Good, bad?
My whole thing. Sorry, what did you say?
No, I'm just saying thoughts on
Yeah.
hockey. Good, bad.
Yeah. No, my thoughts are it's my favorite thing in this story right now, and seeing how it develops in certain people, but like my whole entire comeback to its origins and everything is I can't ever think that Oda wouldn't have this like previously in his mind when he created One Piece, because he made all of the main characters that were like the strongest in the past,
Sure.
and throughout the whole story all are just hockey based, no devil fruits. So when he showed us devil fruits, we were like, oh, this is what's the strongest. But since the beginning, Goldie Roger, he never had a devil fruit, so he had some type of power to be the pirate king. Whether or not it was fully like developed, how he was going to introduce it and what it was going to become, I think that maybe kind of evolved throughout the story, and it is what it is now. But I'm like pretty positive this was always going to be what it is, and it's because the pirate king. He didn't have a devil fruit,
Yeah, both of y'all hinted at it, and I think it's something that Kevin Kelly conceptualized in his book, The Inevitable, and it's about that factor, right? There are certain things that are inevitable, but you don't exactly know what the color or the brand name or the shape of the flower might be once it manifests, but you know innately that the thing is becoming, right? And so I think that we can speak of that in regards to hockey. We may not have known the color, we may not have known the names and the vernacular around it, but I do think conceptually it was inevitable. My bad, Bash, go ahead.
No, you're good, bro. That's a good point, Wilder Free. But yeah, my take on the whole hockey thing, with this take that Killer Cam had, I think he's a stupid idiot.
Agreed.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But
Well said.
You're dead.
I love hockey.
You're
I really
dead.
do love hockey. That being said, yes, there may be some blemishes or plot holes or question marks or things surrounding hockey. But as far as like what it was designed for and what Oda wrote it in for was, I think it was perfect. Because we're talking pre-time skip, we're talking post-time skip, right? So I mean, pre-time skip. Who were the most powerful people or powerful characters at the time? It was Devil Fruit Logia users, right? Like Crocodile, like Aokiji, NL, right? So people like that were like the OP, no pun intended, characters, the One Piece world at the time. So hockey being introduced as a kind of a way to level the playing field, in my opinion. So I think it was necessary for that reason as well. And it's one of those classic pillar power dynamics that you think about when you think about like core animes. Like with Naruto, you have Chakra, and you have Nen with Hunter x Hunter. Jujutsu Kaisen, I forget the name of that power at
Cursed
the
energy.
moment.
Cursed energy.
Cursed energy, yeah. So I mean, One Piece is the pillar of that power dynamic for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Hockey.
I hear all that. I will give you guys this, and just if you're watching this for the viewers out there, this isn't clickbait. Like, I really am gonna make a point that like Oda doesn't really know what he's doing with Haki, and I think
He really will.
He's introduced a power system to fix a problem, which Bash had really, insightfully mentioned, which was, okay, it's pre-timeskip. We have a power system already. It is called Devil Fruits. We have 3 tiers of Devil Fruits. There are Zoan Fruit users who are able to turn into animals in 3 distinct forms. The full animal, hybrid, and then just their base form, right? Then there is Logia Fruits, which basically are supposed to be, generally speaking, elemental level fruits where they turn into an element. They are intangible. They are unable to be struck unless, there's very specific reactions with their devil fruits vis-a-vis.
Yeah, like natural reactions.
Yeah, vis-a-vis like fire and smoke, right? Or lightning
Water
and rubber.
and sand.
Right, or water and sand. Where there needed to be some kind of clever or convenient exploit in order to oppose them, right? But then you have, to your point, or Bash to your point, devil fruit users who are, let's say, ice-based, like Aokiji. And then the question is, okay, well, are they going to use fire? Is that going to be it? Like, what is kind of going to be the counter to this in a pre-timeskip world? I think that basically Oda, specifically after Skypia, Oda's like, okay, we did lightning versus rubber. Luffy was able to go toe-to-toe with another Logia fruit user. Because, again, this is post-Alabasta. We had kind of gotten the... He has his hands wet, or he can use like dampness or whatever to make contact with a solid form of crocodile, right? A little bit of like a cheat, kind of, but whatever. We went with it. With Enel, it was, okay, this is the natural kind of opponent to a lightning fruit user. After that, I think Oda said, okay, I don't know if I really want to come up with like a clever exploit for every single Logia user that I introduced. So I think he was like, okay, I need to start kind of creating a system that allows Logia fruit users to be tangible. So we're going to go through the earliest introductions of Haki, right? Whether that was named, because it wasn't named specifically until Amazon Lily. That is when we hear the term Haki. Before that, we see, and I'll also get into this, instances in which Haki is used. Like clearly what we know to be Haki, specifically Conqueror's Haki. Conqueror's Haki is easily and the most identifiably the form of Haki that Oda clearly had in mind from the beginning of the story. Like the way it is used specifically to intimidate, to cause people to pass out. You'll see as we go through these different examples, Oda had that blocked out like basically when Shanks meets Whitebeard. Like, because that's when we see Conqueror's Haki being used when like everybody around in Whitebeard's crew is just passing out. Prior to that, we had never seen anything like that in relation to Conqueror's Haki or really any kind of what we would visibly recognize as Haki up until this point in the story. So, with that being said, I want to just get into these examples. Okay, so when was Haki concepted, right? I think we can look sort of at the introduction of Shanks versus the Lord of the Coast. It's not really a versus, obviously. It's not like they're fighting, but the Lord of the Coast is about to kill Luffy. Shanks jumps into the water. Clearly, Shanks doesn't have a devil fruit, of course. Jumps into the water, saves Luffy from drowning, because at this point in time, Luffy has eaten the Gomu Gomu no Mi and loses his arm to the Lord of the Coast as a result. Shanks basically entrusting his future into this new generation vis-a-vis Luffy. Luffy is obviously distraught that, Shanks has lost his arm. Shanks then turns to the Lord of the Coast and basically scares him off, right?
Real quick, Killer Cam, hold on.
Go ahead. Yeah.
How the hell did a baby, it was big, but that like small, not odd, powerful animal takes Shanks' arm? Like, why don't we ever talk about that?
Well, the thing is, like,
Shanks
says explicitly, because that's a great point, because Shanks is extremely powerful at that point in time. Shanks says explicitly, like, I gave the arm, right, to basically inspire Luffy. For whatever reason, before Luffy does anything, he reminded Luffy of the Pirate King. I'm sorry. Luffy reminded him of the Pirate King.
him.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you. Luffy reminded him of the Pirate King. So Luffy, like, for whatever reason, Shanks already from like Luffy being a kid believed that Luffy was special, and basically gave his arm to inspire him. In the same moment, obviously, he gives him the hat, or not in the same moment, but like a little bit later on, the crew is departing. He gives Luffy the hat, and then basically says like, give it back to me when you become like a great pirate or whatever, right?
Should have just done the hat. Kept the
He
arm.
should have just done the hat. He should have just done the hat. But either way, he inspired
about
Luffy,
those little
and
moments
that's like
from the beginning.
that is the formative moment of Luffy, not just wanting to become a pirate, wanting to become the Pirate King, but like truly going after his dream. All right, but anyways, so Shanks gives his arm to the Lord of the Coast. He then turns, basically gives like his like intimidating eyes, and the Lord of the Coast just runs off, right? Now we can make the argument, okay, is that like an initial kind of introduction of Conqueror's Haki? Personally, I would say no. I mean, I know people kind of reach for it just because it's an intimidating willpower kind of thing. Let's just be honest, Oda probably wrote that just to show that Shanks was strong, Shanks was powerful, and Shanks was intimidating. I don't think that there was anything more than that, because let's just be honest, when Haki is used to intimidate an animal, generally speaking, they either pass out immediately or they are domesticated effectively. Luffy does this all the time. Mm-hmm. And there are other examples of that where like he's made friends on the island of Rusakaina, right? When he's with Rayleigh and they're training on like the island, and he basically makes friends with all the animals. It's the same thing that we're seeing right now in Elbaf when Luffy made friends with all of Loki's, like, I guess, beasts or underlings or whatever you want to call them. So we had that introduction. There is not another, pseudo-introduction. There is not another example, like a clear example of Haki until chapter 434, right? And guys, you've all seen the photos. I'm going to make sure that these are up. Obviously, I'm talking right now. You will see them up, obviously, as a viewer. But not until 434, and that is basically when we see the first introduction of Conqueror's Haki. And that is when, basically, we see Shanks. He is on the boat with Whitebeard. And, he's walking down the little deck, and crew members of Whitebeard are passing out. And they specifically say, in that moment, his, presence, whatever, is so intimidating, like, rookies or new people pass out, right?
Yeah,
so basically...
I actually do think they mention Haki at that point.
They don't mention it by name. Like, I've looked at the official scanlations. Specifically, he goes, what do you mean by that? Don't ask questions, just go. This is Marco talking to the crew. Then you see somebody pass out, thud. Then it's, hey, what's wrong with you guys? What's going on? That's somebody else in the crew asking the members that are passing out. They say, shoot, it's too late. Calm down, they've only passed out. And then Jozu specifically says, those who have a weak will can't even remain standing in the presence of that man. And then it says, as always, his Haki power is overwhelming. I will say this. I mean, technically they do. I think that's kind of like, I think it's kind of a retcon. I'd love to see like the original like pages, because I don't think the original pages used Haki. I think that like this, like basically just the official releases have just gone back over and changed it. But either
Which
way,
could make sense. No, I agree with that, because I think that the willpower aspect was effectively the real predecessor.
Yeah, it's supposed to basically mean like willpower is important in this world. Shanks is extremely powerful. He's got a lot of willpower. People can't even stand to be with like in his presence, as he is just such a willful, imposing person or whatever, right?
He's got that aura.
Yeah, exactly. He's got
Facts. Aura farming.
We see them split the sky, right? That's our first introduction of them. So, I mean, to be honest, that doesn't really imply Haki use in this part of the story. But obviously it's referenced later on, and then, is used to signify two strong Conqueror's Haki users clashing, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, moving forward. So we don't really see Haki again in use for a while after that, right? We get a touch, we get a little tease with two who we will later find out to be Emperors of the Sea. We don't get another example of that literally until Amazon Lily, which in my opinion is when Haki is formally introduced by name by the Kuja pirates, the Kuja warriors to Luffy, as like they discover him, and particularly I forget the girl's name. she's shooting arrows at him, and he's like, "Whoa, how do these have like so much power behind them?" And she goes, "They're infused with Haki." Now, this is an important distinction, right? And here's why I'm saying that Oda does not have this figured out at this point. Because, question for the class, are you able to infuse Haki into an item that is not in your hand? We've only seen one example of that, which is Emmett, the robot, being infused with Haki from Joy Boy, who is supposed to be this like god of Haki. Like, we've never seen that been done before.
He infused it though, and then gave it away. Like he still had to touch it. He
imparted the Haki, and it lasted and lingered. I mean, for potentially hundreds of years. But we haven't seen somebody like throw a projectile that is infused with Haki. That hasn't been a thing that we've seen. Like, not even Usopp, which maybe that's his next upgrade or whatever, has been able to demonstrate the use of Haki.
We hope.
In a projectile item. Like to...
Yeah, no, that's fair to say.
Yeah. So, even in this point, and keep in mind, we don't have the color or anything like that. Even in this point, I think Oda is still trying to kind of figure out what Haki looks like as it is manifested in the world. Because that particular example, we never see that again. Right? We never see, like, again, projectile item being infused with Haki, particularly giving it destructive force, right? Which would be armament Haki infused, whatever, right? So
yeah, like bullets would be like a crazy Haki thing.
Yeah, I mean, it would basically, kind of invalidate all Loge users because they could just be shot.
Yeah.
And even still, I mean, they should be able to be shot with, like, sea stone, but whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyways, so we have that. There are 4 examples of Luffy using Conqueror's Haki, right? Which I will actually correct this. Luffy uses Conqueror's Haki first, actually before. So Haki is used by name in Amazon Lily. Luffy uses Conqueror's Haki basically when the crew encounters the flying fishman pirates right before Sabaody Archipelago, right? So there's this moment where the crew encounters the flying fishman pirates. They've got a bone to pick with the Straw Hats because Sanji's poorly drawn wanted poster is affecting the basically leader of this group, Duval, whose face looks just like that, right? So they attack the Straw Hats. The Straw Hats hold their own. We get to see like a nice little, teamwork showing with the crew. And in this moment, there is a giant black bison named Montebello that Duval rides, and he charges Luffy, and Luffy basically stops him in his tracks and forces him to pass out, right? And we see like the eyes roll back and then like the bubbly mouth or whatever. Like, it is clear that that is a use of Conqueror's Haki, and everybody else, the rest of the crew, they all react. They're like, what was that? What's crazy? Like, how were you able to do that, right? And Luffy's like, I don't know what that was. I guess he just, got scared or something like that. The next use of Conqueror's Haki, getting back to Amazon Lily, is when Luffy is protecting basically the Kuja pirates that helped him that were turned into stone by Boa Hancock, because Boa Hancock's like basically about to like destroy them or something like that because they're put on the platform. This is when he's fighting Boa Hancock's sisters. And he basically says like, stop, whatever, and then basically shoots out Conqueror's Haki and then causes people to pass out, right? Again, he doesn't know what he's doing. Boa Hancock, who also is a Conqueror's Haki user, recognizes he's got, and they name it, the supreme armament of the king, right? So we get the actual introduction into Conqueror's Haki. Obviously, it has different names, whatever. Conqueror's Haki, supreme armament, or supreme Haki.
Supreme color of the king, something like that.
Yeah. The next instance of Conqueror's Haki. So again, remember what I said. Like, Conqueror's Haki is what Oda clearly has in mind for Haki, right? Like, that seems to be like, this is the thing that I've been thinking about for a while. I gave it a name. Observation Haki is used in that fight with Luffy and Boa Hancock's sisters. And I'll be really honest, in that fight, what is Observation Haki? Observation Haki, the way that it's generally kind of portrayed, and we're going to do a retroactive, and we're going to make a nod to, I forget her name. It's like, what is her name? The little girl from Skypiea. She uses, I think it's like Asha or Anna or something like that, something with an A. She uses what's called mantra. Mantra in Skypia, if you guys remember, is like basically you kind of have like a limited form of omniscience. You can tell like the kind of life, heartbeat, whatever of people around you. You have an idea of where people are. She was like particularly special and skilled at that. Nobody else on the island had it other than Enel. And Enel used basically his devil fruit to enhance it. Right, he was able to kind of tell where everybody was, and to some degree,
I remember that.
could predict the future, sort of. Like, keep in mind, like he was like, okay, there's going to be like 3 of you guys left, or whatever. Like, he was able to kind of make those kind of grand predictions. I don't know if he knew who they would be, but he basically said like by the end of this, there will be like 3 of you left because he gave everybody like challenges to like get to him. Right, if you guys remember that arc at all, right? Like Zoro was a part of it, Robin was a part of it, Wiper was a part of it, Luffy, of course. So anywho, so you had like little instances of what we consider to be like special powers in One Piece that have now been kind of retconned into, okay, this was observation haki. But in the fight with Luffy versus the Sandersonia sisters, right? There's one of them uses observation haki. And the way that it is used, she literally says like left kick, right punch. She can see into the future. It is not just like she knows, like, because she's just got this sixth sense awareness. She knows exactly what is going to happen. Maybe it's limited, but she has the ability to see effectively the very near future. Right now, of course, we get an expansion of that with Katakuri later, which is he can see 5 seconds into the future or whatever. But the point being is like even observation haki, in terms of what it is, seems to be a little bit mixed. Is it seeing into the future?
It's malleable. Yeah.
Is it having like a greater sense of presence, right? In terms of knowing kind of like the general life forms that are around you, right?
They have different use cases depending on the user.
Sure.
Exactly.
Different in everybody.
Sure, but like there is supposed to be a general standard for like, there's a standard for armament haki, right? Your hand or your arm or whatever it is that you're imbuing with armament haki turns dark, right?
Right.
There doesn't seem to be a standard at this point in time for observation haki. Sometimes it's a greater sense of presence. It's like you have the sixth sense for life forms or life around you or whatever. You can even
I think that is the standard sense.
Yeah.
I do think that is the
like,
standard.
The actual term observation is a very blanketed term. Like observation,
it's broad.
It's super broad. Like that's how broad the haki is.
Keep in mind, yes.
Right.
But the way in which Katakuri is made to be unique and made to be special is specifically his advanced observation haki, which is depicted as he can see into the future. And a lot of people forget that when that was introduced, people were like, whoa. He has such a sense presence that he can see into the future and predict things. Like that's
he's
unique.
broken.
That's special, right? Like that's something that like, I mean, in the case of Luffy, he ends up unlocking in that fight to a more limited capacity. And I'll actually get into that because there is a moment where like Luffy does kind of predict the future before that, which is actually pre-timeskip. And you guys, if you're with me, you probably know what I'm talking about. Marineford, like Mihawk. But again, it seems like basically observation haki, whether it's advanced, whether it's not advanced, is still kind of being refined. Right, it's still kind of unclear in terms of what it is. Armament haki isn't even touched at this point in the story. We have not seen anything turn black or dark or anything like that in relation to armament haki. You can make the argument that the arrows that are being fired are an application of armament haki, but again, we haven't seen anything like that in the story since. And
we can also say that Mihawk's blade is a retcon of like an imbued blade with haki, with armament haki.
Yes. That is also a really solid point. So
wait, the black blades?
Yeah, the black blades.
We still don't know that that's why they're black blades, though.
No, we do.
Well, it's been
it's been said.
It's basically been confirmed.
What about Shamrock's sword? Master
Tengu, who ends up turning to be like basically Odin's dad. I forget his actual name.
Yeah.
He confirms, like I think to Zoro, in order to turn it into a black blade. Which is kind of crazy that they weren't black blades. I mean, that's neither here nor there. But like they weren't already black blades by Odin, but whatever. In order to turn them into black blades, you have to feed them enough, like basically haki, supposedly. Okay, so anyway,
Which
so
it speaks
go
to
ahead.
why Ryuma's sword was so great,
Well, yeah, and why Ryuma
and
was so
why
great.
they were willing to trade Ryuma's sword for Odin's.
It's kind of crazy that like Zoro was even able to use that without Haki, which makes you think. But anyways, so basically
Yeah.
we
It was
get
like reforged for him though, because it was bigger than it was
That's a good point. Like
smaller for him.
pre-forged, in a way, like
And he had to adapt
being
to it.
able to emit
Sword
the
had to
Haki
adapt
that
to
was
him.
imbued
you're talking
within
about
him.
Ryuma's sword, or you're talking about Odin's
Ryuma's sword.
Odin's okay, Ryuma's sword. Okay, so
Yeah.
Ryuma.
anyway, so in this point in the story, again, we're still in Amazon Lily. In this point in the story, we get an example of observation Haki, not so much armament Haki, because armament Haki, again, it's not fully refined. We don't see anything turn dark. We don't see that until again like post time skip, right? Or possibly with like Rayleigh. I got to look back and remember and see if his hand actually turns.
No, I don't even remember.
I don't think
that
Rayleigh
scene
turns
go
his
dark.
hand dark.
I
Like,
specifically remember
yeah.
like Rayleigh kicking Kizaru's light sword, and there was no color change.
yeah. Like there's he like makes contact and people are like, how's he able to do that? But anyway, so like
exactly.
basically Amazon Lily, we're getting like teases as far as like a formal power system in development. We get a name, we get different uses, and we get a clear example of like Conqueror's Haki being defined in this moment. The next instance of, or two next instances of Conqueror's Haki are Impel Down, where Luffy is protecting Bon Clay in the little snow level, and Bon Clay is, I mean, technically protecting Luffy because Luffy is just destroyed by this poison at this point.
Yeah.
And he's fighting these wolves, and he's holding his own for a little bit, and then he starts to get outnumbered and jacked up, and then basically is like about to probably be killed. Luffy basically just unleashes an instance of Conqueror's Haki, knocks all the wolves out. Bon Clay, to his credit, is not knocked out. And basically they are rescued shortly after that. Okay, cool. So we get that instance. Again, nobody knows what that is. I don't even think Ivankov is notified that he used Conqueror's Haki, or I don't think he or they can feel Conqueror's Haki from Luffy at this point. But we get a clear confirmation and Luffy displaying Conqueror's Haki to the world when? In Marineford, when Luffy is basically kind of on his last legs a little bit. He's like running out of energy. He's trying desperately to stop the near execution of Ace and basically screams, unleashes Conqueror's Haki, knocks out his two executioners, and everybody that is there recognizes immediately Luffy has Conqueror's Haki, and it is used by name, of course, Supreme, or Supreme Color of the King. Or
Color of
whatever.
the King. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, so fast forward from there. We get instances of Haki being used, right, in that fight. And it's important to really kind of focus in on Marineford because there's obviously a lot of Haki users there, right?
Yeah.
Or clear, soon to be, whatever we can establish them as being powerful figures of the world. They know Haki. Instance one.
Marineford is the use case in which all of the ingredients have been added into the pot.
Yes.
And are now being mixed, right? Like I feel like every other instance before was the gathering of the ingredients themselves. But Marineford is where we truly see all of those ingredients start to come together and manifest as an intentional representation of Haki.
Yes.
True.
So all of like the little elements are there. They're not quite finished yet. Again, we've talked about armament Haki, no visible difference in color or anything like that. Obviously, these things are still being kind of tweaked and refined. But here's what we do see within this. We see Garp punch Marco, who should be intangible, right? He like punches him. Nobody really kind of mentions it, but we know because we've seen Marco in this form be shot at it and just like goes through him that he should not be able to be hit. Garp is able to hit him. Key though, no Black Fist. We see it again when the admirals, and this is a weird thing, and this is what I mean when I say Haki for Oda is still being refined at this point in time. Here's what we see, which we've never seen again, by the way. The admirals are putting up their hands because they are trying to defend from an attack from Whitebeard. So they all go like this, all three admirals, and are somehow making a defensive wall.
Force field, kind of.
Yeah, with like Haki. We've never seen that again. I really don't even know. I mean, I guess it's some extension of armament Haki, but like, we've never seen that. we've never seen it again.
Yeah.
We've never seen it. It's kind of weird. It's like an invisible thing too. It's just odd. And clearly Oda is demonstrating that like there is a higher tier of power within this world that he is still kind of tweaking and kind of refining, right? Which I think that probably during the, I think it was 2 months off that we took with the like time skip in real world time, where Oda's actually kind of like fine tuning what this looks like, because we just get straight into like what Haki looks like and the different applications of it. Basically,
Post time skip.
Yeah, post time skip. That's like effectively what defines the new world, right? Is its Haki power system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One interesting thing about that wall situation with the admirals is like you can tell how much of this was still like in the melting pot being cooked up, because like you see 3 different admirals with 3 very different Logia powers joining together to create some kind of invisible wall. But then as they're talking to one another about, you know, manifesting this wall, so to speak, they're talking to one another almost about like their devil fruit related powers, which is interesting. Like you can tell, like even in the dialogue, Oda's still unclear of like the correlation between Haki and the devil fruit itself, right? Like, is it an extension of one's ability to utilize their devil fruit that gives them the power of Haki, or is it something kind of separate, you know? And I do think that he knows that there is a separation, but he's still playing with the idea here, particularly in that scene, with what the correlation between Haki use and devil fruits are, right? Because there's just like that interesting dialogue of them kind of going back and forth, like, oh, it's because of your ice. And it's like, what does the ice have to do with the Haki?
That's true.
So,
There has to be that separation though, because there's people that have Haki that don't have devil fruits and they're just as powerful, or you know, so it has to be a separation.
Well, it's just weird though, because I'll cite 2 more examples. So we mentioned before that maybe there's kind of a future sight kind of hint with Luffy and basically a skirmish against Mihawk. So looking at the panel itself, here's what you see. Luffy basically shoots out like a, you know, Gomu Gomu no jet. It looks like he's about to do a bazooka. Then we see Mihawk basically kind of like glint. He gives like an intimidating look. And then basically Luffy gets afraid and then like kind of sees in his mind's eye his hand being cut off. Now the question is like, yes, we can look at that in retrospect and be like, that's clearly like Luffy seeing the future. But you could also make an argument that in the moment where Oda was actually writing this, he's showing that like basically Mihawk is enforcing his will, right? And intimidating Luffy and scaring him and making Luffy think this guy is so serious, he'll cut off my hand. Like this guy's not, he's no joke. So even when you're looking at like different retroactive examples, you kind of have to look at them from like the lens of the moment in which they were created and sort of kind of like the mixed elements that are there that still kind of lend itself to a general perception that like this is still in refinement. Like what we know to be the final forms of Haki at this point in the story are still not set.
Heavily agreed.
Cool.
Now, something unique about that, what we know, of course, Oda has drawn a lot of inspiration from other mangas and animes and things of that nature. These powers are not unfamiliar to mangas and shonens or anything like that, right? We have seen that idea, that concept before of willful intimidation, right? It's nothing new. So the representation that we get throughout One Piece, you know, in this moment and before it was truly crystallized as a piece of Haki, right? It's just an application of a power system that is familiar to the shonen power structure in general, right? And just the representation of power within mangas. And I would say that, to your point, Haki is something that he intentionally decided to say, okay, you know what? Will and presence are both always going to be a part of how this power manifests, right? Initially, it might have just been, okay, intimidation or something to that effect. But he's like, okay, well, how can I take that concept that was already rooted pretty strongly, which is the presence and the will of a king or someone who is just extremely willful, what we see in the first chapter with Shanks against the Lord of the Coast. How can I take this concept of willpower and diversify it? And I think that, he saw that opportunity with the observation of, like, okay, willful intimidation, right? Like the presence someone has, so much so, like we see it in plenty different animes. Like it's usually referred to as like, oh, like you have killing intent. We see that in Hunter x Hunter, right? Like in, there's just that aspect of, okay, I can sense something reading off of this person, right? That's a very clear distinction that Oda can draw to willpower. And then another is obvious, what we get with Conqueror's Haki, right? Like that's just sheer presence, being able to knock someone out or to change their will, right? To impose your will so strongly on another that you change their direction or their action. And then with Armament Haki, I think that one was really the one that needed the most clarity and refinement in how it would be drawn together. And I actually don't think that we see it really making sense until we see Zoro in his fight with Enma, right? When we actually see him trying to imbue Armament Haki into this sword that is drawing the will out of him, right? And so that's really when we start to see a crystallization of how willpower is directly correlated to Armament Haki in a way that's different than, what we've gotten up until that point, right? Up until that point, we just see, Armament Haki. You coat your hand and it gets stronger. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's not as much of a correlation with willpower to Armament Haki until Enma, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that point. And to add on to that real quick, Mr. Wild and Free, I mean, with the whole Zoro example, when he awakened Conqueror's Haki in Wano, it's not just your average power up like, oh yeah, we can see this happening, like, this is the right hand mans are fighting and Zoro's supposed to win, so this is what's going to happen. It's not a random power up. It's a culmination of everything that has happened up until this point.
Yep.
Thus, the will example and him getting the will sucked out of him from Enma, it's such a meaningful power up for Zoro to unlock Conqueror's Haki at that point because of everything that had happened in the past and his willpower, his loyalty to Luffy, his willingness to just throw hands at any given moment. I think that is so sick. I'm a Zoro blazer. Freak with me. But
not
I
even
like
just
your point,
throwing hands. Like I would dare say that Zoro could have never had that moment had he not had the previous moment with Kuma, when he decided to shoulder all of the pain of Luffy. Like that, I think, was another very clear, discernible moment that we can look back on and say, okay, yeah, no, it makes sense as to why Zoro was able to awaken Conqueror's Haki.
Well, let me just add this real quick to that moment, because as a resident Sanji stan here, Sanji raised his hand first.
Sanji had it.
He had a nice
raised
his hand first, or maybe it wasn't first, but he basically said, like, let's go. Like, I'm ready to take it on. And then obviously he gets knocked out by Zoro, which it's just such a bad move. I'm going to say bad instead of cursing, but
hilarious.
Bitch ass nigga move. For Zoro. We went there.
That's hilarious.
So I don't know.
I mean,
Sanji has my
to
heart.
be fair, Sanji absolutely tanked that moment with Enel. Like that was such a badass moment when he was like, "Oh, thanks, I needed a light anyway."
Yes,
that was just like such an incredible moment because he was actually looking for a lighter most of that arc. But I think that it's fair to say, like, even in those kind of moments and Sanji's willingness to step up in that moment, even though he wasn't the one to tank it. I do think that should Sanji awaken Conqueror's Haki, which we have spoken to a little bit before, like you said, as he should, as the left wing of the Pirate King.
Yes.
It's these moments that I feel necessitate that awakening, right? Like we have to see these kinds of things matriculate. To Bash's point Mugi Mike speaking to that. It's like we have to see the culmination of these moments
Yes.
to necessitate
Yeah.
why their will is strong enough to be color of the Supreme King.
Okay. So I completely agree. I want to kind of like smooth us back into kind of the flow of like the origins of Haki. There's just one more example within Marineford. Obviously, we know what happens with Haki in the New World. We don't need to go over examples or anything like that. We're talking about how it's been refined leading up to its kind of launch into the New World, into post-timeskip. The last instance of Haki that we really see, I mean, beyond like, Jinbei blocks a punch from Akainu. We can assume that maybe there was some Haki involved in that, but whatever.
Fair. Or his fish hands were just wet. I'm
Yeah,
just
his
kidding.
fish hands were just wet. But more specifically, it is basically Kobe. Kobe unlocks observation Haki. We get the instance of him kind of feeling the souls, if you will, of like the Marines and like hearing voices and like those voices representing people. It very much is its similarity to the other instances of observation Haki that we've seen, whether that's obviously retconned or retroactively kind of applied.
I think the voice thing is
Aisha
something different.
Whoa.
in Skypia, we get Eno obviously with Mantra, we get Usopp with his observation Haki being able to kind of see through walls and stuff like that.
At a
Like
distance.
that seems to be like, at least in my opinion, the standard of observation Haki, which is like being able to sense presences. And then
I like where
obviously
you're
the
going.
advanced application of that is being able to predict behavior or actions, like literally by seeing in the future, whatever. Okay, so
Now,
well,
go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, I was gonna say,
Sorry. I was,
well, yeah, just one last point on that, and
Go
then
ahead, yeah.
I'm gonna transition. But go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say you brought up the voice thing, and I know Moogie Mike was like, "Oh, that might be different," and I know he was thinking about the voice of all things.
Yes.
Yeah, it
And
was.
as you were talking about observation Haki, it just made me think about that and the correlation between like Color of the Supreme King, Conqueror's Haki, and then like Advanced Conqueror's Haki, and then the application of like Advanced Conqueror's Haki into Armament Haki and that kind of thing. So it just really started to make my mind rattle around what is the core essence of the voice of all things, and is it in any way correlated to Haki, specifically some advanced application of observation and conquerors, right? Because
it's possible,
in a way,
but keep in mind
Yeah.
Momonosuke has it, and Momonosuke, as far as we know, has no ability to use Haki. You know what I'm
right?
saying?
Yeah, I think
Right.
it's like a chosen.
I think it's
leader
just a special
type thing.
power, yeah.
Or like a lineage factor.
Because
Some-
even
Lineage
Luffy has
factor
like
or
an
chosen
incomplete
thing.
version of it, because he
Yeah.
can hear, but he can't speak back. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
Like
Right.
Momonosuke is
Luffy-
able to speak to Zunisha, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Luffy can hear like the Sea Kings. He can hear. I think he can hear to Zunisha. I think
Emmett.
that's implied.
Yeah,
Obviously, he can hear
yeah.
Emmett, but he can't seem to like speak back. But anyways, okay.
But
so
I think he emotionally causes them to like react. Sorry, we can move
yeah,
on.
for sure.
yeah, no worries.
Like
So
his, Go ahead.
I hate Momonosuke. He's so soft.
he's got a cool design though.
He's
I think the
8
next time we
years
see
old,
him,
man.
He's a kid.
I think the
He's
next
the
time we
softest
see him
kid.
though, dude, like I think he's
the
gonna look really
softest.
cool.
See, Colin's
nah,
a
I
real
think
G.
he is cool.
Colin's that about that action.
Colin is
Almost
like
just a
20
little
years old or
punk.
something. No,
That's funny.
he's like a
Okay.
giant baby, but an
So
adult.
I want to transition us off because okay, so now we've established fundamentally, Haki prior to post time skip One Piece was clearly still in development. I think nobody will argue that point, right?
Yeah.
Which means, because some people will be like, oh, he always had this in mind. It was perfected from the beginning, and he's dropped all these breadcrumbs and, blueprints or whatever, right? I don't think that's the case. I think that this is something that Oda has basically introduced into the story, right, in order to broaden it, to give more people more access to power, because, again, let's be honest, all the Straw Hats cannot have Devil Fruit powers. It's not going to happen. So we have
Would've
to
been
introduce some way, but then
Someone's gotta
if
get
they fall in the ocean, they're all dead. Right?
Nobody can swim. They all did.
They're all
Zoro
dead.
gotta
won't
get
ever
one.
need that.
But, like-
Zoro's so powerful without it.
Zoro and Frankie.
So we can't give all the
Yeah.
Straw Hats Devil Fruits. So how do we raise the power levels of people who don't have Devil Fruits, who won't get Devil Fruits, right? And then, Mugiwara, to your point, how do we then add an extra little it factor to basically storied, powerful players, Shanks, in this case,
Goldie
Goldie
Roger.
Roger, Garp, who are these like
For
renowned figures in the world, but at this point in time, or not at this point in time, but prior to, Garp was the only person that we had confirmed he did not have a devil fruit. Then we learned that Roger also didn't have one, and then obviously Shanks, we learned that he doesn't have one. Okay,
And
so anyways,
his whole crew.
I mean, we'll see. I think that's still kind of to remain to be seen, but
Okay.
we get basically that like Haki is, just to be real, the highest form of power in the world of One Piece. It trumps a devil fruit. If you are a strong enough Haki user, right, you are just beyond the pale, generally speaking, for any devil fruit user, right? We've seen basically the top 5 people, right? And I'm not going to include villains because obviously we don't know how powerful Emu is, if it's just devil fruit related, if it's Haki, whatever, right?
There you go. There you go.
But we will say that like
Current
of
affairs.
the most
Where
powerful
are we
people
now?
in the world of One Piece, and I'm going to include Garp within that. I know he's past his prime, but like let's just say like a prime Garp doesn't have a devil fruit. Shanks doesn't have a devil fruit. Shanks can still be considered in his prime. Roger didn't have a devil fruit, and when he fought, obviously when we see him fight, he's in his prime. Some of the most powerful players, I would argue, within the world of One Piece don't have devil fruits.
Mihawk.
Mihawk. And it is precisely because they have Conqueror's Haki. And they are extremely strong with their Conqueror's Haki because we know that Conqueror's Haki supersedes just Armament Haki or Observation Haki. It is like the top. And generally speaking, if you have Conqueror's Haki, you've got the other two anyways, right? So that being said, Haki has now risen to be the dominant form of power within the world of One Piece. You cannot be a powerful player. Kaido literally says this in his fight with Luffy, that devil fruits are like child's play. The real, basically like emperors of the sea, the real players or whatever, like you have to compete with Conqueror's Haki specifically. And it's even like, I mean, I'll even throw in a nod to Kid. Kid is, kind of implied to be at a similar level of Luffy because he has Conqueror's Haki. That's one thing that Law doesn't have, even though Kid was just a complete, just dumpster fire of like a character, at least so far he is.
I think he was intentionally a dumpster fire, though.
Maybe, but he's just such
He
a
had such
waste.
a bad attitude all the time. He was always trying to do bad things and fight. And
I think Oda
It was
assumed
like-
that he might be more popular, but he just never got to the level of Law. Like Law is an extremely popular character. Kid is just like never, like no one really respects Kid. So, anyway,
But law is like a important tertiary, right? Where I would say like Luffy and Kid are like red and blue. Law is yellow. Not just proverbially speaking, like that's kind of like color theme implied,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
But there is a very real connotation there that Kid is this altered version of Luffy, right? Like if Luffy had a bad personality and did everything wrong, or like was too much erring on the side of pompous arrogance and thinking that everything will go his way, like Kid is that representation of him, right? Even with Conqueror's Haki, things can still go bad. You can lose an arm and you can lose your life, right? At the cost of your arrogance. And I think that Oda utilizes Kid in this way to kind of show a parallel opposition to Luffy's character dynamic and development.
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that I definitely want to do a Kid video at some point because I just think he's such a weird character in the sense of the way that he's set
His
up,
crew is
the way
the
that he
worst.
pays off, the way that he interacts with other players in the world. Like he goes down to his own, he loses an arm off screen, right? To like, I think he loses it to Big Mom, right? Like,
Beckman. Ben Beckman.
Oh
you're
yeah,
right.
when he first went after Shanks.
That's crazy. Okay, anyway, so like he just went back for seconds. And,
Yeah, you're
Well,
going after Ben, dude.
Okay,
What
but
are you
anyways,
doing?
so like, point being is like, we will do a video on Kid because he's just such a really strange character. But the question, right, is like, okay, so we have this introduction of a new power system. I think we can all kind of guess as to why. It's like, why do we need a new power system? We needed a new power system because we wanted to make it a more level playing field for non-Devil Fruit users. and to basically give an avenue to battling with Logia fruit users, right? So we have our why. Now the question is, does it work for the story moving forward? So in the original part of the video, in the beginning, I mentioned the problem that you have now in One Piece, right, with Haki, is power creep. We've already established that in order to be a top hitter in this world, you need Conqueror's Haki. Period. End of story. It's the reason why Luffy has it. To be honest, it's the reason why Zoro has it. Zoro is not going to be the most powerful swordsman in the world without it. It's just not going to happen. So that's why he has it. So the point is that now that is a necessity to compete in this world. So the question is, what do we do with the Straw Hats who don't have it? They got to get it. They have to get it. And now we're in this position where, like, for whatever reason, they haven't gotten it. Maybe they'll get it in this
they
arc.
don't need to get it. You think all of Shank's crew has Conqueror's Haki?
No. We're not talking about Conqueror's Haki. We're just talking about Haki just in general. I don't think they're all going to have Conquerors. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Not Conquerors.
They're going
Haki.
to need
they all are
Haki.
going to have Haki.
They're going to have to have Haki. I mean, to be honest, I think every reader, fan, whatever, assumed that we would see a demonstration of them using Haki within Wano, within the raid on Onigashima. But we don't get it. I mean, even as far as Nico Robin, we're still questioning if her, devil fruit, or not devil fruit, her devil form is an application, which hasn't been confirmed, of armament Haki.
I feel like it's
we don't
fair
know.
to say, but we don't know.
It hasn't been confirmed. It should be confirmed.
Yeah.
It should absolutely.
It should have been confirmed.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been confirmed, so we cannot assume that it is. But the point being is, like, we are going to enter a space soon when the Straw Hats, I mean, forget end game kind of stuff with them, directly going head to head with the world government and with the Holy Knights and with Mary Joie and all of that, right? And then that's, not even counting maybe what the position of the Marines will be or whatever. But we're talking about the Blackbeard pirates, who we can reasonably assume all know Haki. So
yeah,
definitely,
we need to see the Straw Hats with Haki. Period. I don't care if it's observation. I don't care if it's armament or both. But, like, particularly in this moment, which has been exemplified by Elbaf, by the God's Knights, by the fact that Luffy, Zoro, Sanji are out of pocket in this moment, and the only people, hopefully, without Luffy and Zoro and Sanji coming to the rescue, which basically turns us into One Punch Man, the Straw Hats need to basically pull their pants up and get that Haki, and they need to get it now if they're going to compete or be even somewhat relevant in the new world.
Yeah.
Enos,
kind of pathetic they don't have it already.
I mean, dude, like,
it's kind of like a slap in our face.
It was crazy because in Wano, we're looking at the Tobiropo and we're like, okay, so you guys are the all-stars of, like, like an Emperor's crew. You guys need to know Haki. It doesn't make sense why you wouldn't know Haki. None of them use it except for like a handful for opponents that we know have Haki. Basically, Jinbei. Jinbei versus Who's Who, we actually see Haki. We don't see it in Frankie's fight. We see it, like,
I think we see it in
knows
Robin's.
it. Ulti knows it
Yeah,
because she
we
goes
see
head to
it.
head with Luffy, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like she's using her Haki in her headbutts against, like, Nami. I think she might have used it on Usopp because Usopp obviously is understood to be, like, tough. Nami, we've already discussed this. Nami gets a headbutt, but she gets it off screen. We don't see it, which, I have my own feelings of that.
I thought we saw it.
No, we don't see it. I went back and looked it up. We don't see it. But all of those fights, Robin, Chopper, I mean, that's basically kind of it. Nobody uses Haki.
Yeah.
Their enemies don't even use Haki, which is crazy to say. Like, why isn't the person that, like, why isn't Sasaki in the Frankie fight? Why isn't he using Haki?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
They're not even trying to learn Haki. They're just, like, running away and being weak. It's so lame.
To be fair,
even their forms, dude, like, they
just
weren't
wanna
even
be bullied.
awakened. Like, I don't know, whatever. But, like,
yeah.
I don't know. But anyways,
so one thing I was gonna mention that since you brought up Frankie, that is technically the third power system, or second. I would say that that's the second power system that we get inside of One Piece, which is science, right? And technology. And so I think it's fair to account for that, especially because of Vegapunk and what we see with the pacifistas and the way that they're
Seraphins.
represented, the
I would put even
Seraphim.
Sea Stone within that
Yeah.
range. The bubbles.
I wouldn't
Like,
necessarily
I would
call
say
that a
that
all
power
these things.
system.
Sea Stone is Sea
could
Stone
be,
in and of
though.
itself.
It is a
Sea
power
Stone in and of
system.
itself is
It
like
could be a power system.
a natural debuff, right? And it is directly implied to be because of its source from the ocean, right? And so I think that that is separate and almost like a neutral debuff specifically related to devil fruits. But tangentially, hockey exists completely separately from devil fruits. I think science exists completely separately from devil fruits and hockey.
Here's what
and
I'll
I
say
think
about
it
the
needs to be
science thing,
accounted
though.
for, especially because of Frankie. We get Germa 66
Yeah.
and we get
Yeah.
But the thing about the
Vegapunk.
science, though, is like, here's why science isn't a power system and why devil fruits and hockey specifically are. Hockey, everybody has in the world the ability to unlock observation and armament hockey. They don't really explicitly
Everyone has
say-
the opportunity to learn science.
Or be like.
I mean, but
blessed
like
with some
learn
crazy
science is
shot
such like
or smile
a
fruit.
vague. I mean, the reason why science in this particular case isn't a power system is because everybody doesn't have access to the same technology. That's what I'm trying to get across. Like you have weapon
Everybody
systems.
doesn't have access to the same devil fruits or the same hockey.
No, but they have access to devil fruits. Period. You get what I'm saying?
it's still a
Like
power
everybody
system,
can
like-
eat a devil fruit and access devil fruit powers, right? The same way. Everybody can access hockey and access the same powers, right?
And
Not
everybody
everyone-
could learn the things that Frankie was
Yeah,
learning. Everybody
everyone
could
could-
learn
No.
the things that the German
Frankie is
66
a
were learning.
genius.
And,
Like,
well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so,
in
I
the
mean-
same way that genius is an application of science or a benefactor.
No, but not
for
everybody has
science,
the
is
mindset
the same
to
way
learn
that Color
the way.
Supreme King and all of that.
But not everybody has the capacity in the world of One Piece to be a Vegapunk, to be a Frankie. Like these are specific like geniuses. I'll give you this.
Right.
Here's what I'll give you. In specific arcs, there are certain technologies that exist. I'm thinking Skypia, I'm thinking the dials, that I wouldn't necessarily say are a power system, but I would say that like in those contained arcs, everybody has access to them and they are used for power. I mean, I would really call them like
Yeah.
weapons or tools more so than like power
but
systems.
I think that's still like completely viable. Like, would you?
Yeah.
Like, it's like magical items. It would be like you would have a
Like
magical sword. You know,
Usopp's
or
little
something.
stuff,
Yeah, like the
that-
way that
that
they
counts.
take it,
Nami's
like, and
wand.
make like Looney Tune type of levels of like weaponry and like crazy stuff, like bubbles and all these things that actually are powerful and do change the tides. I
Yes.
think like and like dude.
Yeah, but I
Sanji's
mean,
a
keep in
straight
mind,
up
like-
cyborg
I'm-
from like a
Guys,
shot, you know.
There's
Yeah.
variances
Yeah.
though. There's variances that like okay, so I'll give you an example. Devil fruits have 3 tiers. Within the 3 tiers, there are devil fruits that are stronger than other devil fruits, right? So there's a spectrum of power within this system, right? Same thing with hockey. There are people who have observation, armament, no hockey, conquerors, advanced conquerors. Like there's a spectrum. In the
And there's
case,
also a spectrum in science.
in the case, I'm just going to use like dials as an example. In the case of dials, like there is, let's say, impact and then reject dials, and then that's it. There's no
Well,
other
that's
dials.
just so you're just
There's
thinking
like a
about
fire
tools,
dial.
right? So
No, I'm
let's-
not. I'm not
let's-
saying there are
let's
no.
think about.
Well, let me get the point.
Okay.
I'm not saying that there are no other dials. What I'm saying is that like there's not a wide spectrum of like power within dials, and you can make the argument, oh, well, it's just the way you use it, whatever. That's not what I'm talking about because you can obviously make that argument with anything. I'm saying that within the context, and I'm just using dials as an example because like dials are a technology that are specific to an arc,
Yes.
and like are I would argue clearly defined. And to be honest, some of the dials don't even work outside of Skypia.
Yeah. No. Right.
Like basically we know that in the world of One Piece there are unique powers. Rokushiki, I would argue Rokushiki is a power system because people can learn Rokushiki.
I agree.
Right? I don't
It's a
think
martial
that-
art.
I don't think the science is applicable in the sense of not everyone can learn it because not everybody has the aptitude, but I would say that like for particular people, whether that's
Yeah.
Frankie, whether that's Vegapunk or whatever, or the satellites,
Usopp.
the pacifistas, whatever. It is a technology that is sort of kind of mixed within the world, or like the pacifistas, right?
Yeah.
Or the seraphim. It is a technology that is mixed within the world that is used to like also kind of level set against. I'll give it to you. It is a power. I don't think it's like
There you go.
widely attainable,
Right.
because it's not like the average
totally
person
a
can just
power,
like.
dude.
For sure. I'm not gonna say that
I mean,
science.
I wouldn't say
I'm
it's
not
a-
gonna say that.
I wouldn't say
it's
it's a tier of power. I would not say that. Like, it's not
What
a
I'm
power
saying is
system.
that
Be,
it's
like
it
there
is a.
could
It
be
is
someone riding up just with weapons, doing some crazy shit.
Hold on,
like,
Bash.
let's
I know
say
you
that
gotta
it's
run, bro.
not the
But
Four Horsemen.
go ahead and give your sign off, dude.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right. Bash Ketchum, I'm out. I just gotta say, I love hockey. I think imbuing the will of your spirit to change the world is the dopest thing ever. And
Facts.
doing that through your hockey, I think that's sick. So yeah, that's my final quote.
All right, bro.
Indeed.
Ciao.
Yeah.
All right, bro.
Peace. See you, Bash.
All right. Peace.
Yeah, no. So I just definitely think that science, in and of itself, within the world of One Piece, could be worth its own conversation as well. But I just
Yeah.
wanted to bring it up. I agree to the sense that science in the world of One Piece as a power system shouldn't be looked at as a stable leg, right? Like if we're looking at the various power systems that are applicable in the world of One Piece, I think that it is a great accessory or a unique factor, very similar to the Rokushiki, like you're talking about,
Yeah.
where in limited scopes, it does present a viable option to turn the tides, right? But not everyone has access to Rokushiki. Not everyone has access to science. Not everyone has access
But they have
to
the
those
ability to
special
learn it.
powers.
You get what I'm
Like,
saying?
yes.
Like, my thing is,
And
like,
they
it's
have the ability to
like,
utilize
learn
the
it.
tools of science. And that was my point too, right? Because the
They can use the
dials could be
dials, yeah.
used by just anyone. Nami and her wand, like
Yeah.
that science wand is a very applicable,
But that's not a
use
power
case
system, though.
for-
If
Like, I
you're
feel like
saying
that's.
you have the
Well,
ability
what
to
I'm
learn
saying is,
Rokushiki,
in and of
you
itself-
have the ability to learn science.
yeah.
No,
And exactly.
No, not at all.
Exactly.
Well, one's a martial
Yeah.
art, and one is like a discipline of like intelligence.
a class.
It requires intelligence.
One is
Luffy
a
can't
physical
requires
science.
school.
Luffy
Well,
cannot
that's
learn
because
science.
Luffy is not
Luffy-
the smartest person.
Zoro
in the-
cannot learn science.
He's not.
Sanji,
Yeah, but
Those two
like-
are not the two in the show.
But like these people aren't scientists.
Sanji is science.
Yeah, but you can say
That's
that
the
about
difference,
like
right?
someone
But he's
can't
not-
learn
That was the
martial
point
arts.
I was going to make. That's the point I was going to
handicapped
make is
person
that
can't
you're
learn
just
martial
looking at it
arts.
from the perspective of, like, even when you brought up the whole dials thing, you're like, oh yeah, there's not enough application there. Well, I'm saying that dials are a subset of a
Yeah.
category of a power system within science, right? Which is
Yeah.
tools, right? Things
Yeah.
that can be utilized in the hands of those who may or may not even have the scientific knowledge and wisdom to create it themselves.
Okay,
right?
all
So that's
all right.
one
Let me say
subset
one thing.
of
Let me say
science.
one thing. Okay. Science is definitely a presence in the world of One Piece, but I want to
For
point
sure.
out a specific distinction.
Yeah.
Let's look at the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Are there many cyborgs in the Marines? And
We've
All
a
seen
lot
the
of
some.
the pacifist
guys,
All the
just let me
pacifistas.
let me properly set it up.
Mm-hmm.
The actual Marines themselves don't seem to be using the science. You get what I'm saying? Like the individual Marines, we're talking about like vice captains, admirals, whatever. What power system do they use? They use hockey related abilities. They use devil fruits.
Rokushiki
They use
and-
Rokushiki, right? They have access to those powers, right? What they do when they're utilizing their science is that they're not utilizing their science to like put lasers on people. They're creating robots, pacifistas, right? That are their own individual, basically tools or weapons to use for
Yes.
them. So sure, like
Entities.
I would argue that like whether it's the Dials, whether it's the
Mm-hmm.
Pacifista, like the only characters that are technically using science, like putting it in their bodies to use as a source of power, two. Frankie, who is a cyborg, Vegapunk, who basically like created artificial android bodies for himself. Like that's
and a
it.
part of the world government.
So because only
Sanji and
two
all of his
users-
siblings. Sanji and all
But
of
they're
his
not
siblings.
cyborgs, though.
Absolute. Yeah, but that's
They're
well,
like
they are.
genetic
They're
Borgs.
they're genetically modified. That is another application of science, and that's what I was talking about, right? Where it's like, okay, you have tools as a subset of science. You have
Yeah.
the actual cyborg application of it, right? Embedding science like as mechanisms, transhumanism into the body, and then you have genetic modification, right? Which is another application of science.
But I mean, it's
And
not a
so
power
in that
system
way,
unless
in that way,
Dude,
you can
even
look at it
smiles
the same way.
are science.
Technically,
Like-
but that's a
yeah, but I mean that's like a
means
bot's
to
like you know what I mean.
correlate.
It's like
I'm
not
just
like an
saying,
effective
it's
thing.
Science
But
is
effectively,
doing
what
that.
I'm saying is that
But
you
even
have
still, it's
these
like a copy of a
subsets
devil fruit. It's
within
copying-
the world of science.
It wouldn't
Okay,
happen
alright.
without
The
science.
same way you were talking. Hold on. The
Yeah, go
same
ahead.
way you all were talking about observation hockey, armament hockey, conqueror's hockey, right? You have tools, you have transhumanism, cyborgs, and then you have bioengineering, right? Like you have
Mr.
these
Wadenfried,
subsets
the problem
of
though is the
application of
availability and
science.
the ubiquity. You get what I'm saying? Like
Again, I told you, I think it's fair to
Yeah.
assess that science isn't completely as accessible and ubiquitous as something like devil fruits or.
but for it to be a
They're
power
like
system, it has to be.
impossible to find.
No. I'll give you an example.
But
though.
I think it's well enough defined, and we see so many examples of it that it should be considered.
If you look,
That's all I'm saying.
Here's the thing: if the Marines were using, let's say, dials or something like that, okay, cool. If they were using Wappa metal in like a really interesting way that like augmented or enhanced their abilities,
That was another great
I would give you
example.
that. But we're not seeing that, so it's
Kinda.
not a great example. But like, I'll give you a better example. If you look at My Hero Academia, obviously
support
everybody
class
has
and-
quirks. There are people who have powers and there are people who don't, right? The people who have powers are vis-a-vis quirks. That is the power system, right? You can make an argument that if the supplemental, let's say, support items or whatever,
Right.
were more ubiquitous, that to some degree is a lesser tier of the power system that basically puts them on the same playing field as people who have quirks, right? Like it is meant to supplement ordinary people so that they can compete and to be a part of this larger echelon of powerful players within the world.
Right.
I think that
So you're
if you
saying
were
it's
to
not
have
In My Hero.
like I would say that it's closer because like it's available. It's not widely used, but it's available. You get what I'm saying? Particularly at the end of My Hero Academia, if you guys, viewers, if you
Spoiler
if you're
alert
caught
for
up,
those
yeah.
that know.
Whatever. And even then, it's like prohibitively expensive. But in the world of One Piece, if Vegapunk's future world of like Mother Flame, limitless power allows for the average person to, because Vegapunk had a lot of interesting answers to Devil Fruit users, like the big bubble thing or whatever. Like he has technology that puts basically power in the palms of the hands of the powerless, right? That allows them to defend themselves, to compete with powerful people within the world, right?
Yeah.
If that was ubiquitous, like again, I would argue that like a power system on Skypia is the dials. If you are on Skypia and you are able to utilize the dials, which are available, it gives you power, right? It gives you power to compete with Devil Fruit users, with strong hockey users, whatever, right? I would agree with you that like the technology that Vegapunk is able to create, if ubiquitous, if widely available, right, or available, would be a power system if it was utilized in a greater capacity. I don't think because it hasn't been, I wouldn't call it a power system at this point. I would consider the technology of the Pacifistas, the Seraphim, I would consider those to just be like weapon systems, right? Or just
I actually kind of agree.
You know what I mean?
Power system itself is like its definition. I don't think is lining up well with what like science is and stuff. Like science is not.
Yeah.
If you have a laser beam sword, like that's it. You're not like training that laser beam to become like. It's not like some deep process of anything. It's like a tool.
So the reason why I think of a correlation of a power system with science is this, right? Like if you have something that can turn the tide of a battle and it can be improved upon, right? We see this very clearly with Frankie and the way that he upgrades his own body physically, right? We see this in the variations of science with the dials, with the weather wand, with the Germa 66 and their application of bioengineering. We see it with Vegapunk and all of his applications of science. We see it with the pacifistas, and we see it with the Seraphim. I will agree that right now, in current time One Piece, it's fair to say that technology is not particularly a power system as we should know it, right? But the reason why I will still defend science and technology as a power system within the world of One Piece is heavily predicated on the past and the ancient kingdom, right? Which is, as we know it, supposed to be a very heavily advanced technological society that was once wiped from history, right? And so I think that Emmett is a very clear example of science showing up in a way that can turn the tides in a very serious bout, right? Because we haven't even begun to touch on the whole magic power system that we're emerging into, this whole devil magicry that we're kind of dealing with now, right? For Emmett to show up, and yes, that was imbued with Haki, right? But there is some aspect of the erasure of the technology of the ancient kingdom that should be brought to the forefront of this conversation as to why science is not currently a, let's say, a fulcrum in the movement of power systems within the world of One Piece. But I'm saying that there are vestiges there. There are symbols and storytelling that is continuing to impress upon us why science is important in the world of One Piece and the ongoing power dynamic.
Okay, I agree with that, and I think that's a solid
I agree
point.
with that. Yeah, that's pretty solid.
One thing that I'll add is, like, with the technology at its height that we've seen in One Piece, what it tends to do is copy existing devil fruits. For instance, the original pacifistas were meant to basically kind of take Kuma's Buccaneer body and basically just make it tougher and add lasers. And the lasers were based off of Kizaru.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
In the case of the Seraphim, they are copying Lunarians. They are, with the green blood
Copying
or
devil
whatever
fruits,
it is, they have basically copied
Directly.
devil fruits. Right? So I guess for me, like, the next step to, like, truly establish technology and science as a power system within One Piece would be to see unique applications that are, again, available, or more specifically, like, adaptable and customizable to the user. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, like, a user, takes in, like, I'm just going to give, like, a really cliche example, but, like, they have the ability to create micro nanobots, and because of that, they're able to shield themselves and to manipulate them in a way similar, probably actually, to kind of Kid, but, like, manipulate them in a way that is unique or that is interesting, or some other application of something using technology. But anyways, like,
I can understand that.
Not to get stuck on, like, the power system. I mean, we are talking about power systems because obviously we're talking about Haki.
Yeah.
Just kind of wrapping things up. I think the issue that I'm having with Haki, right, and that I still think Oda is trying to figure out, is that as we enter the end game of One Piece, this is going to be, and hopefully we get some more information on that with this week's chapter, with the rest of the non-monster trio Straw Hats basically captured and, kind of lacking an answer to the Gods Knights. I think that answer has to be Haki in some way, shape, or form. And we need to see the Straw Hats exercise it, because that is currently the world of power that Oda has presented to us. Haki is supreme.
Yeah.
And he wrote himself into that position by basically establishing that every single major enemy that Luffy encounters more or less has conquerors Haki. So that is what it is. So, we'll see. We'll see how the rest of the Straw Hat crew develop, but I'm just saying this right now. If they do not develop Haki, we are looking at this story turning into One Punch Man, where Haki users are forced to save the day. And whether that is Luffy or Zoro or Sanji or new players like Scopper Gaban, I don't think fans want to constantly see the Straw Hats being completely out of their element because they lack Haki.
I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. Another thing I would point out too is that, you know, you brought up Blackbeard, right? And the power dynamic that, you know, we have to see a manifestation of Haki for the Straw Hats in order for them to contend with their very direct adversaries from the Blackbeard pirate crew, right? But I feel like with the existing power systems, that was all well and good. But now in Elbaf, and especially after Egghead, with the introduction of that whole magic, devilish kind of power system that we're starting to see in this immortality, you know, if anything, I feel like this is where Oda has started to introduce something that's a bit rocky and hard for us to really congeal or mesh with in regards to the systems that we are familiar and comfortable with, right? It took some time for Oda to really articulate and create the finesse of the system of Haki that we have grown to appreciate, right? We've seen all of the ways that he has retconned it through the story to make it make sense. And I think it's important because it's like a game of, you know, John Kempo, you know, rock, paper, scissors, right? Where you have a very clear, okay, you have rock, you have paper, and you have scissors. And then all of a sudden, here comes this magic power system, and it's just like, oh, well, I'm a bomb. And I just, it's kind of weird. It feels like that.
It throws it off balance for sure.
It throws it off balance. And so I think that we're going to really have to consider what its articulation is, right? Because we still don't know. We don't know if this is some kind of unique devil fruit manifestation or some kind of application of Haki or whatever it is, right? But if it is its own power system entirely, then I don't know. I feel like maybe Oda kind of shot himself in the foot a little bit in regards to the comment from Kaido that you brought up, which is very valid, right? Which is like, it was clearly defined that Haki is the power system that you must use in order to stand at the precipice of this world, right? And so for him to say that and then all of a sudden introduce devil magic powers and people who are immortal, that completely throws things out of line with the power dynamic that we have grown to understand and interpret. And so I think, like with Blackbeard, that still makes sense to me, right? Okay, give them some Haki, they'd be able to solve that scenario. But this whole God's Knights and Emu and the Elder Stars, I'm completely befuddled as to what they're actually going to be able to do to resolve for this.
Well, another thing too, and I'll make this quick because I want to get Moogie Mike's final thoughts before we close things out. And appreciate you guys if you're still watching. I know this is a long one, but obviously it's a very, very storied discussion. There's lots to talk about and lots to dive in, particularly its implications for the rest of the series. But I think the problem, and you mentioned this, is like Oda has defined Conqueror's Haki to be particularly its strength, to be the supreme, for lack of a better word, no pun intended, power of the One Piece world. And the reason why I say that is because we just had an example of that in Egghead, where the only thing that was even able to challenge the Five Elders was Emmett's basically eruption of Conqueror's Haki that Joy Boy left behind. Period.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? I mean, technically, yes, like the thing that ended up killing Saint Saturn was Emu effectively withdrawing his power. I mean, we can assume that since Emu can make God's Knights and make Elder Stars, we can assume that maybe there's some kind of contractual aspect that is tied with his powers, which basically still makes them subject to Haki. But the only way that Luffy was able to even make basically Saturn have to regenerate was through his use of Advanced Conqueror's Haki in his Gear 5th form. Like, that hurt him, he ended up recovering or regenerating or whatever, but it was really like conqueror's Haki that was the difference maker in defending against, or basically putting up any kind of resistance to, in this case, the 5 Elder Stars. Period.
Yeah.
Which tells you that no one else should be able to do anything other than
exactly.
Luffy, Zoro, hopefully Sanji, and whatever other strong players that they can cobble together. And to be honest, that is a problem. That's a problem for the story, because no one else will have anything to do unless Oda nerfs their opponent, which is, as Wano has demonstrated, unsatisfying to the reader. Mugi, let me get your thoughts, bro.
No, I mean, I agree. What you just said is both of you actually hit some really good points. I think the only situation why we're probably seeing this right now and feeling this way is because half of the Straw Hats are so incredibly underpowered. And we're seeing it in, like, real time. Like, it's already happened. Like, the Conqueror's Haki thing you're talking about is, and it being, like, just, like, if you don't have Conqueror's Haki, you're not even playing the game. Like, in the end, like, you really can't do shit if someone comes up and sorry for the language. If someone comes up and they do have Conquerors, like, you're just like, okay, now I'm useless, even though I have a Devil Fruit, I have Future Sight, I have all this crazy stuff, all null and void just because a Conqueror's person comes up. Yeah. And, like, I totally get that. And I think also the speed of how these chapters are being written right now and how they are just, like, super plot driven is really, like, going to be taking away from the growth of, like, power in our characters. It's making me think about this a lot. Like, I've ever since Kobe, the Holy One, has been, like, has been brought up. Like, the fact that Kobe's situation exists and we have these Straw Hats who are running around doing nothing, and they have to go against people with Conquerors. It's kind of grim, and it is, like, I don't know how you're going to get yourself out of that unless you get super detailed into the powers of these characters. They get some type of, like, ability, weapon, like, any edge, just to at least be able to fight the players that aren't with Conquerors, because they can't even fight that. I don't know. I'm going to be going down this road of how weak the Straw Hats are probably every conversation. But that's where I'm at. I'm actually in agreement with you. I love Haki, but there needs to be more development, and they maybe even need to go and branch really far into, like, what observation is. Maybe there's way more different types of armament. That's what would be, like, throwing things for Usopp. Like, he could be doing way more stuff. It's just not being developed. So it is scary to see.
You know what Oda should do? Oda should treat, like, the last level of Haki as, like, a Nenhatsu. Like, if he called it like a Haki signature, like a observation, like a signature observation Haki or something like that, right? Because to be honest, with Katakuri, we thought, like, Katakuri just has his own special version of, like, observation Haki. He's such a like a badass. No one should be able to copy that because he's focused and put so much skill points into this particular, like, signature application of it. That would have been nice because you still could have got, like,
well, dude,
effectively, like, Devil Fruit kind of abilities.
I think they're doing that with Zoro. I think Zoro's stuff is like that. I mean, that's gonna be.
That would be really cool. I mean, we just need confirmation on that. Even when it came to, like, even to some degree, well, I mean, you could kind of say it's the same thing, but, like, Usopp's execution of his Haki, it kind of had a different kind of look to it because he was able to kind of, like, one, see from a very big distance, and then two, like,
incredible
see
distance.
Like, shapes and stuff like that. But either way, it's like that would be such a nice, because to your point, you could introduce Haki to the Straw Hats, but it still comes out in a way that is unique to them. It requires a little bit more thought. But, I mean, it is what it is. But I will say this.
Like, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. One last thing for me, and then you guys can send us home. This chapter is going to be extremely telling. Because it will either involve the Straw Hats solving their own problems, or it will set us up for Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro to solve it for them.
To sweep in and save the day.
Yeah, Robin's.
you're not wrong.
Robin has to step up right now.
I'm
Robin's
going
to
on-
put my
Robin's on the
chips-
clock.
I'm going to put my chips on Chopper not doing much and Robin actually showing confirmed Haki. That's what I'm expecting to see.
I mean, we better see something.
We got to see something. We have
Yeah.
to see
At
something.
the very
but
least,
like
Robin.
the Straw Hats, if they do not show up, sans the Monster Trio in this arc. I mean, yes, we'll probably still get something with
I'm not
them
watching
versus
One
the
Piece
Blackbeard
again.
Pirates.
I
But
won't
like,
read it again.
if we have to wait that
You lying.
long, I'm telling you right now, if they just magic up basically Haki during the Blackbeard Pirates and it just comes out of
Yeah.
nowhere, it's gonna feel like an ass pull. I'm just saying that now.
Yeah.
It's gonna feel like an ass pull. So Oda,
sure.
if you're listening, Oda, if you can hear us, give them Haki now, right now, in this
Yeah.
arc. It's gotta happen.
This
Yeah.
is the moment for sure. For sure. You know, I think that there are so many ways that we spoke about Haki needing to be earned, right? And your point just now really emphasizes that, right? Like if it comes at the final straw, it's going to feel like an ass pull.
Yes.
The way that Zoro earned his conqueror's Haki felt like, yes, he deserved that.
Oh yeah.
The application that you're talking about, and I agree with Moogie Mike, that I think they are trying to lead into that specific application of Haki powers, and we see this most with observation Haki and just a little bit of conqueror's Haki, right? To the point, Zoro has a specific application of conqueror's Haki. He can, by extension of imbuing his will through his swords, right? Kind of conjure the conqueror's Haki that can kind of quell people to pass out, right? But it's not as intentional of an application as something like Luffy, where he can look at you and just be like, yo, sit down. And it happened.
That's funny.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that that's one of the unique applications that we were seeing. And I'm not going to say that it's wholly unique to the point that you were referring to with Katakuri, because I agree that that was a very specific way in which he could have manifested and displayed that Haki power. But we see Luffy earn a little bit of it, and we also see an aggrandized version of it. I will say it has some nuance, but we effectively see an aggrandized version of it through Shanks
Yes.
and his battle with Kid, right? He just could see like 10 seconds into the future, right? He
Yeah.
had supreme future sight, which kind of, to your point, nerfs or it kind of makes Katakuri's representation of observation Haki seem like less than.
Yes.
And so I think that if Oda takes the opportunity to really dive into the nuance of how observation Haki can show up, specifically for characters like Usopp, whether it's an attention to detail on distance, which plays very well to his specificity as a sniper, right? I think that if we start to see that, you know, we'll really get exactly what we need out of Haki. And I don't think that it is something that he is completely remiss on, right? Like, I think he knows this, and I think he's been trying to explore it. It's what I've spoken about when I've when I've made hints that I think Nami might have, Haki through Zeus, right? It's not inherently hers, but I think that she inherited Haki through Zeus, right? And
yeah.
that's something that I stand by. When she utilizes her weather wand and Zeus is at the end of it and it turns black, I feel like that's a representation of an awakening of Haki. It's not confirmed, but I think that that's Oda trying to represent how might Haki manifest within these particular Straw Hat characters in a way that's unique to them.
Moogie, you got any more thoughts?
No.
Okay. I'll just add one thing
All
to
good
that,
points.
which is this, which is, what were we told in Wano? Haki blooms in conflict. We need the Straw Hats to have more fights. They need more fights. It can't bloom unless they have fights. If Oda keeps stopping them from having fights because Luffy fights all of them or Zoro and Sanji take all of the fights, you will never see Haki bloom within them. We need another Enos
smacked around
proper
every
Enos
fight.
Lobby. We need
Agreed.
We need a proper Enos Lobby. It was supposed to be Wano. We really didn't get it.
Yeah.
We need proper fights so that Haki can bloom, so that they can bust out new abilities, and that when they take on the Blackbeard Pirates, we know that it's basically going to be evenly matched.
For sure. And we mean proper 1v1s, right? We're not talking about that
No tag team
old team
BS.
running around and tag teaming and like
I'm
relying
down for
on
a
Big
real
Mom. That
battle.
is whack.
Yes. We need...
Let's go to a battle.
I don't care how tired Oda is. Take breaks. But we need at least, and I'm saying uninterrupted, we need at least 3 to 4 chapters per fight, period. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how long it takes.
Go, guys.
All right, bro.
Moogie
All right,
Mike, I'm out.
All right, Moogie.
Thanks, guys.
Till next time.
Peace
All right,
and
let's end it on
blessings,
this one.
Mookie Mike.
It's your boy Killy Cam. It's Anime Parlay. Thanks for watching. Let the rest of the do their thing.
Peace and blessings, y'all. Mr. Wild and Free. Well, I hit 2.75 miles,
Hey, there we
99
go.
minutes walking.
Yakking it up.
Hey.
Yeah, it's Moogie Mike. I'm out.
Peace. All right, everybody. Till next time.
All right, guys. Later.